former Workplace Relations Minister Eric Abetz, who froze politicians' pay when he served for former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, says it may need to be considered. Joining me now from Hobart is Senator Abetz. Now, this push for China's Day of Reckoning is gathering momentum, Senator, and of course you've even got the unlikely ally of the Greens saying that it's probably the right thing to do right now.
When you've got the combination of the Tasmanian Greens leader combining with myself saying that this is the right thing to do, you've got an idea of the strength of the community sentiment, which is so very strong everywhere I go. People are telling me, the ones I'm allowed to talk to, that this is like criminal negligence. The communist dictatorship in China, they were warned in 2003 with SARS, with swine flu in 2009, and again now in 2019 into 2020, we've got COVID-19. So they were warned, they knew the problems from the wet markets, they were told to dismantle them, get rid of them because of the danger to humanity, and they refused to do so. And then when this one sparked off, they sought to hide it, and the doctors that were blowing the whistle in relation to the epidemic turned into pandemic were dealt with exceptionally harshly, and there's been a huge cover-up, aided and abetted, might I add, by the World Health Organization. There needs to be an accounting because they literally do have people's lives on their hands and have destroyed literally millions of livelihoods in every country of the world. They do need to be brought to account.
Senator Abetz, you mentioned the World Health Organization, and there is very credible evidence that they were also slow off the mark. In many respects, there was a conspiracy by the WHO and the Chinese government to keep the West in the dark on this, and it's failed spectacularly. There's evidence that if we'd have known about this 2 weeks prior to China fessing up, it would have eradicated about 95% of the deaths that are happening right now, which is extraordinary. It is criminal negligence. There's no doubt about that.
And look, what is worse is, once they knew what was happening, they had their operatives in Australia and in other countries of the world buying up personal protective equipment and shipping it into China. So they knew what was going on, but keeping it from the world and then taking our equipment over to their country. This is where the behaviour of the communist regime is so deplorable, completely unacceptable. They need to be brought to account by the whole world community, and I hope that occurs. But having said all that, we've got to get through this pandemic first, but there has to be a day of reckoning afterwards. And also, might I add, within Australia, we have to become more self-sufficient with the supply chains. And when it comes to national security, it's not only about our military hardware, it also has to be about our medical capacity and some of those fundamental services being fully contained within Australia so that we can deliver them for and on behalf of the people of Australia from within Australia.
You're spot on about that self-sufficiency. I think that's so important with the supply chain. Look, last time we spoke, Eric, you were glowing in your praise, quite rightly, of the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and of course Frydenberg and Hunt, who are doing a brilliant job. But it's paid off because their popularity rating, certainly the Prime Minister's popularity rating, has climbed to levels not seen since Kevin Rudd back in 2009. Now, we all know how that finished. He shouldn't be getting too far ahead of himself, should he?
I know Scott Morrison, I know Josh Frydenberg, and can I tell you what they are doing? They are doing for the people of Australia and for our future, and they are not having an eye to the opinion polls. And I think they all know, as I do, that there will be a day of reckoning after this, where very tough decisions will need to be made. The government largesse will need to be wound back, and the taxpayers will have to start tightening their belts, because all this money that's being rolled out now as a national emergency, and I understand why we're doing it, but it will need to be repaid, and we will be leaving a legacy of debt to the next generation and possibly the one after that. And as a result, we've got to be very conscious of the responsibility we owe to the next generation to try to wind back this debt as quickly as possible.
It's probably a little bit premature to be talking about what sort of measures will be put in place, but certainly you'd have to accept, Senator, that taxation, I mean, we saw a deficit levy introduced a couple of years ago. You know, there's going to have to be some sort of extra taxation impost, you would imagine.
Look, not necessarily, and let's work all this out at the appropriate time, but no country has ever taxed its way into wealth. What you've got to do is to try to grow your economy again, encourage entrepreneurship, encourage enterprise, encourage hard work, encourage increased productivity. They're the things that are going to grow the national pie and assist us in paying off the debt. If we tax too hard, the incentive for economic growth will not be there for individual endeavour. That will be stifled, and as a result, I don't think we'll be getting the results that we need. What I think we need to do is cut some of the fat out of government, ask some of the fundamental questions. Do we need this particular area of the bureaucracy? Is it really serving a good need for the Australian community? Can we do without it? They're the sort of things that I hope we will be asking. But look, all that is down the track, hopefully relatively soon.
Sure.
But let's get ourselves through this pandemic, and especially the next couple of weeks.
Now, the private sector is experiencing a lot of pain, and of course we've seen the stimulus packages, which have been fantastic, to build that bridge to get us to the other side. But there's also been speculation about certainly bureaucrats not taking pay increases, and in Queensland that's been a big issue up here. But the Prime Minister's also ruled out cutting the pay packets of politicians. Are you agreeable there?
Look, I'm in a personal situation where I understand others might find it more difficult, so I leave these matters to the Remuneration Tribunal, and whilst I was Employment Minister, I took a proposal to the Remuneration Tribunal for the freezing of wages of parliamentarians, departmental secretaries and the like, and the Remuneration Tribunal agreed with my submission at the time, because we were in very tight budgetary circumstances, and whether such a submission will be made in the future, that's going to be left up to the Prime Minister, not myself. But I believe that we need to show leadership, and potentially the freeze is something that I think is worthy of consideration.
Senator Eric Abetz, always great to have you on Sky News Across Australia. Thank you for joining us tonight.